For a level 1 inspection, if we're doing this roadside, just some good pointers on if you get stopped by someone roadside is our number 1 priority when we're stopping trucks to do inspections or just for a roadside stop is we want to be in a safe spot to do it. So typically what I tell people is, you're driving a big rig, it can be hard to find a good spot to park off to the side of the road that's going to be safe for everyone, for you guys, for other people on the highway, and for us to do these inspections. So if you just put on your 4-ways just to let us know, like, hey, you see me, we'll follow you to wherever you want to go to do this inspection at. So wide shoulder, or if you want to take an exit and get off to an off ramp, or there's a parking lot or a truck stop nearby that you want to go to, as long as we're not following you for like 5 miles down the road, just put your hazards on and just pull off where you can find a safe place to go. So that's the number 1 thing about these inspections is we want to be safe on the side of the road. So typically what we start with is the paperwork. You'll find when you go through these inspections, all officers have a different method of where to start, where they want to start, and how to go through the inspection process. But for a majority of us, we usually start with the paperwork, trying to find out, who's the driver, who's the company, what are you hauling, because it's not necessarily always obvious. Like with a flatbed, you might have an enclosed trailer, and we like to find out if you got hazmat on board, just for like safety purposes, because if there's a bunch of fluid leaking out the back and there's no placards on it and you got hazmat, it's kind of nice to know that I'm walking around in acid before I walk in it some more. So we'll start with paperwork. He's got a mock book in there, I think, for me.
Yeah.
So I'll usually just start with, hey, do you have a truck book with all your paperwork in it? If I can see that.
Would you ask for CDL first? Probably get all that.
Yeah, whatever order. Yeah, all at the same time. So I might, as an officer, I might ask for his truck book first and ask him, where are you coming from? Where are you headed to? Coming from Spokane to Spokane Valley. That's where I'm going. I'll look at the book. System has these nice books with all the registration in it and stuff like that. Sometimes you'll have the registration on the trailer. I know they had said not everyone's from System. Some of you work for different companies. So you might have a different setup than what they have here, than just a book. But this is typically what we see. We see a book with everything in it, and you don't necessarily have to pull your stuff out of the book for us. We usually just take the whole book from you, especially when we're on the side of the road, wind's blowing around. We don't want papers everywhere. So what we're looking for in these books, sometimes you'll have ELD instruction sheets, and that's a requirement to have for your records of duty status. So if we see that, that's a plus. That's one thing off the list. The other thing we're looking for, see if I can find it in here. Insurance. So an insurance card, there's another thing off the list. Your fuel tax agreement, which usually, if you're based out of Washington, will have the seal of Washington in it, or whatever state you're out of on there, your company's out of. And we're looking for, obviously, 2024 right now. So it'll say International Fuel Tax Agreement with an IFTA on it. And you should also have decals. This truck is new, so it doesn't, actually it does have a decal. Yes. There's no decals. So yeah, you'll have to have paper and a decal for the IFTA. If you're hauling hazmat, you should have a hazardous material certificate of registration. Let's see what else we got here. I don't think there's a registration in here yet for this.
No.
So the other thing we look for is a registration for the truck. Sometimes the companies might keep a registration for the trailer in here, or like I said, it might be on the trailer itself. So typically that's what we see in the books, or what we're looking for is your truck registration, your insurance, your fuel tax agreement. Sometimes you might have an annual periodic inspection. If you all know what that is, it's basically an inspection done on the truck by a mechanic that says, this truck's roadworthy, they've checked all the items on the list. You'll sometimes have like a salmon or orange colored paper in here, and then a decal on the truck with some information on it about the inspection. And that's pretty much it for the book. The other thing I'd grab from him is his driver's license. I'll give this back to you. His driver's license. I might ask for a current copy of his medical card. The medical card typically is tied to your CDL, and we don't need a copy of it. But if we're out in the sticks somewhere with no cell service, it might be pretty hard for me to get your medical card information. So sometimes it's handy to have that available for us to view. Just make sure you got a valid medical card. The other things we're looking for in terms of safety, is there anyone else in the truck? Are there any co-drivers we need to know about for your records of duty status? So moving on from the registrations and the annual inspections and all that stuff, I'd move into your record of duty status. Are you using a paper logbook or are you using an ELD? Electronic device, he's got the instruction sheet in the booklet. I'm also looking to see where is it mounted. So I'll have you open the door for me here, sir. And I don't know if this truck has one in it yet. What's that? An ELD?
Yep. There, she got one in.
So
I can take it out, hand it
Cool.
to you, or
Awesome.
I can pull up and show you the email process, how we can send them to you for hours of service.
So this is typically the system everyone's on now is like some sort of tablet or phone system, right? So we're looking to see where is this at, because I'll be honest, sometimes this is on the floor and they don't see where their hours are at when they're driving, and that's the whole purpose of it being mounted, is to be able to see how much drive time you have left and to be able to plan when you need to park and where to park. So this should be mounted somewhere. The officer may ask you to just transfer it, and if that's the case, they'll give you a code. Usually it's like a badge number or something like that. They'll give you a code. You should all know how to transfer your logbooks to what's called FMCSA Web Services, or it might just say Web Services, depending on the ELD program you're using. But it is a requirement for you as a driver to know how to do that. So if I were to walk up to him and be like, hey, can you transfer your records of duty status or your logbooks over to me? Here's my code. He's supposed to know how to do that. If he doesn't know how to do that, it's technically a violation. But I'll be honest, it's not a violation I usually take. I'll just usually help them work through it, figure out how to do it, and I'll get it transferred. That's my main concern, is just looking at the hours to see what he's got. So once he transfers it, or I assist in transferring it, typing in my code, I'll give it back to him. I'll ask him if he's got blank logbooks. And a lot of drivers will get confused when I ask them this, because they think I'm trying to catch them doing double logbooks or something sneaky or something like that. I'm just asking, do you have blank logbook papers for emergency use in case that tablet breaks, or someone out at the truck stop broke into your truck and steals that? Do you have something you can use as a backup to get back to the truck yard? So that's what I'd ask for next. Once I've checked his driver's license, I've checked his DOT number, I've done all the paperwork, his logbooks look great. I'm going to move into the equipment part of it. So usually to start with the equipment part, it depends on where the driver's at in the inspection. So if I have him out and about looking for trailer paperwork and stuff, I might actually do some of the equipment stuff at the same time I'm getting paperwork. But if he's out of the truck, I'll be like, hey, since you're out of the truck already, because I know usually a fire extinguisher sits here or in here, and he's already out of the truck, I'll just ask him to see the fire extinguisher in orange triangles. That's typically the next thing I'll go to, is looking for those kind of what we call in-cab equipment that they're required to have. So you're required to have a minimum of 3 triangles, cones, or flares, or what we call warning devices. If you break down the side of the road, you're required to put those 3 out. So you got to have a minimum of 3. With the triangles, it's actually really good that they have them on the other side, because if you think about it, when you break down, that side of the truck is the one that's the safest side to be on when you're on the side of the road. So triangles and fire extinguisher on that side of the truck, if you can, is going to be safest for you as a driver when you're getting out of the truck. What I'll usually do is have them crack this open. I'll make sure there's 3 in there. Make sure there's no, drugs or anything else in there. The fire extinguisher, what I'm looking for is the arrow in the green. So is this in the green? Is it in the go zone? If it's overcharged, it's not necessarily a problem, but it's not good. It means that this is a defective fire extinguisher. And sometimes you'll see overcharging, like when the vehicle gets really hot. It's been sitting out in the sun. This is up in the cab. It's been heating up. It starts to get overpressurized, which can be a warning sign that if this gets overpressurized, it can degas off, and then it'll go to discharge and it'll be ineffective. So if you do see a fire extinguisher going to overcharge, it's still usable, but it's a sign that it's going to go bad soon, and you should have it serviced or replaced with a new one. If it's in the empty, obviously it's been discharged, it's not going to work. So the other aspect of the fire extinguisher we're looking for is it's secured. So this has still got the bracket to it, it's not secured yet. So this would be a violation. It's an unsecured fire extinguisher. There's one also down in there. Okay,
That
good.
just comes with everything.
Yes. there is
Oh,
a
okay,
bracket
gotcha.
right back here.
Okay, good. So that's what we want to see is a fire extinguisher secured. So if they have 2 fire extinguishers, that's fine as long as one of them is operative and secured. The reason it needs to be secured is if the truck's moving around and rattling around, these tend to pop off on their own and discharge, and then you have an unusable fire extinguisher, or they tend to fly around the cab if you're in a collision and can cause other injury or damage. So we want these bolted down and secured. The next thing I'll check after that, I'll have the lights checked out, the windshield wipers, stuff like that. So I'll ask them to hop back up in the driver's seat for me. And typically I'll go through this stuff first. Some drivers will get ahead of themselves and start opening the hood up for me. I don't want that because when you open up the hood, it makes it really hard for me to see the lights when I'm going through light signals. So when he turns that ignition on, I don't want him to turn the truck all the way on. I just want him to turn the key so that the gauges click on. You guys all heard the ABS system start to click up and down the trailer. What I'm doing when he turns that key on is I'm also looking for that ABS light on the trailer. On most systems, it should turn on and then turn off. If it stays on, or if it's on before he even turns the key on and it stays on, it usually means there's some sort of problem going on. I'll look into it a little bit further. But that's the other thing I'm checking for when he turns that system over, is the ABS functioning? Can I hear it go through all the checks? And am I seeing the light go on and then back off? The next thing I'll have him do is turn all of his lights on as if he's driving at night. So all the marker lights, headlights, everything should be on. I'll have him do windshield wipers with a quick cycle of water. So what I'm checking for here is, do the wipers cycle and do the washers work? Perfect, thank you. So if you have no washer fluid, it's still a violation because I can't verify, is the fluid out or is the pump not working? Obviously we can hear the pump here, but on the side of the road, it's really hard to hear if a pump's working or not. The washers are required to work, so make sure your fluid's topped off. Next thing I'll have them do is a quick tap of the city horn, quick tap the air horn, and make sure both those horns work. You're only required to have one horn work, so as long as one of those 2 work, you're good to go. But we'll check both. All your lights are on, yes sir?
Yep.
All right, awesome. Brakes are all set, everything's in park. Cool. So a lot of these trucks come with automatic light checking systems. You can set them, they'll cycle through all the lights. I found, like me personally, and a lot of officers don't like to do that because it's just easier for us to go through the hand motions and know exactly what signals we're looking at, and making sure also that maybe there's something going on where the automatic light check's working, but the actual manual switch is broken. So the lights work, but the manual switch for the turn signals, if he were to manually activate it, is broken somewhere up there. So I'll start at the front, I'll give you hand signals for the lights,
Okay.
and then we'll go to the back and we'll do hand signals for the back lights. So since I have someone else here with me, I'll have him go to the back and look at the lights for me. All right, I'll have you do your turn signals and your 4-way flashers, and go ahead and turn those off. High beams. Perfect, good. And brake.
Right?
Good. Some officers might also check the lights on the truck. So you might have 2 light checks. You might do a light check at the back of the truck and at the back of the trailer. You only need the lights at the back of the trailer because obviously the lights at the back of the truck aren't visible when you're hooked up to a trailer, but they still are required to work as part of the functioning lights of the truck. So next thing I'll have them do in preparation for a full brake check is tell me, hey, what's your air pressure at? Are you able to see what your air pressure at is that on the gauges?
Yeah, these are the newer stuff. So it looks like I'm sitting, as I sit right now, is at 96 psi.
96 psi, that's perfect. So as long as we're not getting anywhere into the danger zone of between 70 and 80, we're good for our brake checks. So we usually like to sit at about 80 or up for our PSI for our brake checks. So now we've gone through all the lights, we've checked the windshield washers and stuff, and just is kind of take a break in a second. We're not going through like a full inspection, flow. I'm doing the truck first, and then we'll do the trailer after we do the full inspection on the truck. So the lights are done. We've done the lights on the back of the trailer. All that stuff's good. I'm going to have them step out and open up the hood of the truck for me. I'm just taking a general overview of the whole engine compartment. Are there any leaks on the asphalt, any fluids that I can see? Sometimes this is hard roadside because there's old leaks on the side of the highways sometimes. So I'm trying to look for any active drips or anything that still looks wet, and see if I can find anywhere that's coming from. I'm looking in at the brake. What kind of brake setup does this truck have? So it's got disc brakes, which makes it pretty easy for me. There's no push rod for me to measure. I'm looking at the brake can. Is there anything coming out of the brake can? Is there any active air leaks that I can hear going on? I'm looking at the steering components. Is there anything loose, damaged, missing? I'm going to try to look as best as I can at the disc brakes, see if there's any oil contamination from maybe a broken wheel seal, leaking oil on it, or is there any rust on the surface, any cracks, anything like that. Looking at the tire, any bulges on the side, tread, is the tread good, bulges on the inside, any cuts, exposed cord, tire cord, which can be pretty easy to see if you have a flashlight. It's always good to have a flashlight on you. If you shine that flashlight on any exposed steel cord, it's just going to sparkle and shimmer right back at you. But I will say sometimes you can get some road debris that can leave a shimmer or sparkle on your tire that'll look like steel cord. So just take, with a glove on your hand and just see if it rubs off, because sometimes it's just a shimmer or sparkle from, something you ran over on the road. So, but the steel cord should be pretty obvious. You'll see a braided cord in there in the rubber. Sometimes it'll start fraying out and poking out. I'm going to be checking all the lugs. Are any of the lugs loose? Do they have covers on them? If they have covers on them, it makes it a little bit more difficult to tell if they're loose. But I'll just check in general if there's anything loose here. Are there any cracks in the wheel? Any damage to the wheel that I need to pay attention to? I'm looking at the steering pitman arm, steering assembly. Any leaks here? Is the fluid at an appropriate level? Sometimes you'll have your diesel filter, which this one is back here. I'll look at the diesel filter in there. Does that look good? Is there dyed diesel coming through that filter? Does it look red to me? Because that'll be a big issue if you've got off-road diesel in there. Looking at anything I can to see if there's any issues, just a general scan. There's nothing in particular other than the steering and braking components and the fluid reservoirs that I can look at, that I'm looking at specifically. And then while I'm here, looking at the tire and the wheel and the securement of that. The next thing I'll do, if I don't need to mark chalk on a push rod up here, which this one's disc, I don't, I'll mark a chalk line right here on the pitman arm across, so that way I can check to see if there's any play. I'll have the driver rock the steering wheel back and forth as hard as he can. If you go ahead and do that now. And I'm just, with the chalk line, I'm just checking to see if there's any movement between these two joints here. If there's any movement whatsoever, it's a red tag, it's done for. I'm also checking all the knuckles, seeing if there's anything loose, damaged right here. On the other side, the same thing as well. I'm looking at all the joints of the steering system, seeing if there's anything loose while he's rocking it back and forth. The other thing I'll be paying attention to, this one happens to have power steering. It's a brand nice new truck. If it's an older truck, you can tend to tell if there's going to be excessive steering wheel lash or steering wheel play. If it's got manual turning, there's no power steering to it, which you don't usually see in trucks, but sometimes you will if it's a really old truck. So what I might have him do, just to get his air pressure up and everything, is start the truck. If you want to go ahead and start the truck for me now. And I'll have him rock the steering wheel back and forth. And I'm just looking to see how far is that moving in comparison to where that's moving there. All right, you're good? Go ahead and turn it off for me. So while it's running, the power steering is running and everything, he's turning that wheel. If it looks to me like he's really getting a lot of movement out of that steering wheel before these tires start to move, I'll do what's called a steering wheel lash check. So I'll have him open up the door, and I'll use the usually the turn signal or the windshield wiper control right there as a reference, and I'll take a piece of chalk and I'll mark on the steering wheel where it is in reference to that turn signal handle there. And I'll have him turn the truck on, start to turn it really, really slowly until I see that tire move. As soon as that tire moves, he'll stop. I'll mark it with chalk again, and I'll measure how much play with the tape measure that steering wheel lash is. And then I'll measure across the entire diameter of the steering wheel. And there's a chart, and if you're all familiar with CVSA and the out of service criteria, there's a chart in that book that tells you what size steering wheel and how much steering wheel lash or how much steering wheel play it's allowed to have for that size of a steering wheel. So I'll take that measurement and look in that chart and see, is this acceptable? Is it not acceptable? Or is it a red tag out of service? So that's the other check I'm doing up there. Other parts of the truck, once I'm done with the front engine compartment, as I'm going down the side, again, just looking for any body damage. The other part of the body damage on the hood is anything going to be touching the tire while it's moving. So if you had some body damage to the front here and it was pushing some fender or bumper in to the tire and it's touching the tire, that's an automatic red tag. You can't move because you have a moving part touching a non-moving part while it's traveling. So I'm looking for similar things. Other body damage. Is the fuel tank strap secure? Is it busted off? Is the fuel tank cap on? Or is it left off and there's fuel dumping on the road? That's the other thing I'm checking there. Is typically there's batteries in here. It looks like there is on this side. I'm just checking to see that this cover is secure. Are the batteries secured? Are they loose or damaged? Coming back here, I'm looking at all the airlines. I'm looking to see if there's any cuts or frays in the airlines. Are they all intact? Some airlines have an outer shell around them or an outer coating. And there's different criteria on what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, depending on the type of airline you have. Is it an air hose or is it a thermoplastic tube? So we're looking to see what kind of airlines you have. Is there any damage there? Are they tied up? Are they on the board chafing? A lot of guys will keep equipment bungee strapped here. We're checking to make sure all that equipment's secure. There should be nothing on this deck that's just sitting there loose. Making sure your equipments are nice and tight. Are there any air leaks coming out of these connections here? That's the other thing we're looking for. Again, looking at the tires, sidewall. For the duals, there can't be anything in between the tires. So I should be able to look in here. It should be clear. Looking at the wheels, the lugs. Again, another set of tires. Excuse me. The other part about doing these truck inspections or walk around is trying to look at as much as I can from the outside before I get underneath and look underneath. Because if I can spot it out here, I can make a mental note when I get underneath, I need to look closer at it. So I'll also look at the airbags, suspension. If I can see brake cans, I'll look at brake cans, see if I see anything there. Anything with the drive line, is the drive line just hanging out there on the ground? Or anything like that. Just trying to look at as much as I can. At this kind of vantage point, you can get more of a view of the fuel tank, exhaust systems that come out here, the cab suspension airbags. Let's see. We'll look at the fifth wheel. If you have a sliding fifth wheel, are the pins locked? Are they unlocked? And it's important with the fifth wheel pins, and I've actually found it more this year than I have ever before, where the fifth wheel is actually jarred a little bit. It's a sliding fifth wheel and it's jarred a little bit. For whatever reason, something happened to it, whether the trailer jackknifed or something. And one side of the pins were locked in, but the other side were not. So it's important to check both sides. Excuse me. Again, back here, airbags. Lights, license plate lamp, and your mud flaps. That is pretty much it for the level 1 inspection for the truck. The last few things have to do with the the connection to the trailer. So the emergency brake valve, brake check valve, and the emergency breakaway for the trailer. So after I've done the truck and the trailer, everything's done. This is typically the last part that's to be done that involves using the truck. I'll make sure that the brakes are still all released. And the reason this is for is to simulate that you're driving down the road and the trailer breaks away. It just comes off the truck. Because usually what happens, thank you very much, that's what I needed.
Thanks, Tim.
Usually what happens is I'll ask the driver to disconnect these airlines from the trailer, and your automatic instinct is to set the brakes so you don't lose the air. But the part of this test is to simulate the trailer's broken off and you still got air going to the trailer. The really nice thing about these new trucks, they have a lot of warning systems, right? So when you have these brakes released and the doors open and the truck's not on, sometimes they'll honk at you and it'll be really obnoxious and loud and annoying. But that's how you know you're doing this right. So next I'll have the driver disconnect these airlines. And we're just gonna let the air bleed out of there. So this is simulating the trailer just left it left your point of view, right? It's off the road, it disconnected for whatever reason. That's what we want to hear is, you can hear the trailer brake setting. That valve should pop off to keep the truck from losing air. Because if that valve does not work and you're gonna continue to lose air, you're eventually gonna lose your truck brakes, right? So what I'll have them do now is press and hold the brake. And we're listening to hear if there's any air coming out of these. Sometimes you'll have a valve that will work and it'll activate, but it should also stay activated when he presses that brake. Sometimes as trucks age, if you press that brake, it will just blow out that valve. If that valve is aged or is damaged, it'll just blow out that valve and it'll start blowing out air again when he presses the brake. You can go ahead and release. The next thing I'll look at is what is his air pressure at now?
So 64 psi, and that's the secondary, and then the main one's 78.
Perfect. So that's where you want to be at. Is about 60 to 70 psi is when that should activate. The next test I would do, which I'm not going to have them do, is just pump the air brakes down on the truck, and we're looking for the emergency brakes or the parking brakes to activate on the truck, which should be at about 45 psi is when those should activate. And I'll just have them pump the brakes as fast as you can, get the air pressure all the way down. It should pop, and then at that point, all the brakes should be set. I'll have you go ahead and set the brakes for me. The other thing I'm looking for is a low air warning, which is usually on newer trucks, you get it pretty much right away. As you start to lose air, you get a low air warning, but you should have a light and a tone flashing at you when the air gets low on your truck. So, all right, you can hop out if you want to. I think we're all done there. The reflective tape on the vehicle. So we have these top back corners. There should be reflective tape on each corner on the back, and then on the mud flaps as well. So that's another thing we check for. We talked about the fifth wheel plate. That pretty much sums up the inspection process for the truck for a level 1 inspection.
We work our way down the side of the trailer looking for any cracks. When we go underneath to do the brakes, we're going to check all the cross members and whatnot, looking for any cracks, anything broken, any airlines that are rubbing. If I see an airline rubbing on the metal, I'll usually turn it around and make sure it's not rubbing through. Not a whole lot on the side of this. Checking to make sure all the ID lights and clearance lights work. And then same thing that he was talking about back here with the tires and wheels. We're going to check, make sure there's no cracks. Actually grab the lug nuts on a level 1. I actually grab them all and give them a little twist, because it's amazing how many times I'll find 1 or 2 loose or missing or broke. If the mechanics have over tightened them, sometimes the whole thing will fall off in your hand, which is really neat. This one's got disc brakes, so we don't have any push rods to measure on here, but we're still going to go under there with our creeper on level 1 and look at the actual brake system under there, make sure there's no corrosion like he said, or any inner wheel seal problems. We're going to check the tires for bulges like he said, nothing stuck in between rocks or anything. I'm still looking at all the airlines. When I'm under a trailer, I'm always checking all the airlines under there to make sure there's nothing. If you see them crossing each other and stuff, usually they're going to wear under there, and then we'll find them worn through in there. So looking for that kind of stuff all the way through. The suspension and the airbags, make sure there's no cracks, nothing in there. Checking all that with a flashlight. Even in the middle of the day, it's nice to have a flashlight. Any of that kind of stuff, looking under there. Checking up around the suspension and stuff around here. We're always looking for cracks around the suspension itself. Cracks in the welds, cracks in the stuff gets beat up. I deal a lot with log trucks, so a lot of that stuff's really beat up. And on the back, he already said, so we're checking to make sure that when he turned the key on, if you can't see it from up there, but making sure this light comes on and turns back off again. If we see that on driving down the road, you know their ABS is working. So checking that. Clearance lights, all the lights on the back like he checked earlier. Mud flaps, and then rear impact guard, making sure that's on the newer trailers, and most trailers they're going to be fine, but making sure that it's there and it's not cracked, it's not bent sticking way out. If they've gotten rear-ended or something, that could come in. I've seen them bent all the way into where it's touching the tire. So on the tires, I'm always looking for anything shiny, especially around the steer axle, but always looking for anything shiny where the tires might be touching. Obviously the load securement of whatever you're hauling, checking to make sure the load's secure, making sure we don't have rocks and debris on here. Especially if you're hauling like an excavator or something, we'll see a lot more of that where they'll just drive it up on there and there'll be rocks and debris all over the deck. Make sure that stuff's swept off.
Do you need a flashlight or anything? Yeah,
Trailer.
I think the only thing I'm gonna add that I've noticed a lot recently this year is, like you said, with load securement. When we're checking the load securement, we're actually checking where the load securement's attached to as well. Is it damaged where it's attached to? Because if you got this thing hooked to, like right here, but the hook is like the weld's completely broken off and it's barely hanging on, that's not a good form of load securement. So checking where the load securement's attached to on the trailer and making sure that's in good condition is another thing we're checking for as we walk down and check everything.
Oh, and the sliding tandems, making sure the pins are locked.
Couple points I want to make. The registration book. If you ever hop in a truck you're not used to, you want to double check that. Big reason is time is money, and none of us want to sit on the side of the road as long as we have to. So if you make sure you have current registration, current paperwork, it'll make the officers' jobs a lot quicker if they're having to go through a bunch of expired stuff. Also, what I would say is make yourself familiar with 395.34, which is what to do in the event your ELD breaks. I'll either print off a copy for yourself and hold on to it, or have your company put it in your registration book, because there is certain steps you have to do immediately if your ELD breaks. One of those steps is you have to recreate your logs for the last 7 days. Smart thing to do is call your company, have them log in the system, and email you a copy of those logs. You do that, it'll save you the headache of having to pull out paper logs and try to remember what you've done for the last 7 days. One additional thing I wanted to talk about was the ABS system. They talked about how when you turn the key, you see the light flash on. There's 2 other tests that we do roadside. Another one is with the key on, pump the brake. Okay, so let me back up. If you turn the key, you don't see that light turn on. Leave the key on, start the truck, pump the brake. If that light doesn't flash on, there's a 3rd test we do with the truck running. Remove the pigtail from the trailer, let all the electricity out, and then plug the pigtail back in. If that ABS light still doesn't turn on, either one is burnt out or there's an issue. And that's an idea for you to know, hey, I should have this trailer looked at before I move it, because if I get stopped roadside, that's a roadside violation you would get for not having an operative ABS system. Or if the ABS system on your dash on the truck, if those lights in the dashboard light up, then you know you have an ABS issue. And if stopped roadside, those would be violations that would be listed on the report. Because the trucking industry is so heavily regulated, all state inspectors, officers who are certified with the CVSA, they can conduct roadside inspections at any time. So just because you're going down the road, you got red and blues behind you, doesn't mean you necessarily did anything wrong. So when they stop you, they could just be stopping you for a random inspection. So don't, if you see red and blues, don't be like, oh, what did I do wrong? It could just be an inspection.
To kind of tie it all into one, since we kind of broke it out, it might seem kind of confusing compared to an actual inspection you may get roadside. We kind of blend these all in together and get multiple things done at one time. So I could have this whole side of the truck, the passenger side of the truck, tires and everything checked before I even come up and make contact with you and ask for your driver's license. I could check all your straps on your load securement as I'm walking up to grab your driver's license. So what we demonstrated today isn't super practical to how we actually do it roadside. Roadside, we're doing multiple things at once because we want to get you guys back on the road as fast as possible, because like you said, we can stop you for random inspections and we don't want to hold you up from doing what you guys need to do, to make your paychecks and stuff. We just want to get the safety checks done, do them thorough, but also do them as fast as possible to get you back to work.